Hello, AP History friends. This is Mr. Claus, and I am here to guide you through a document-based question. You can use this at home to practice, just sort of pause when you want to do a thing and restart the video when you want. This particular video is designed for writing what I'm calling the Skillful 6. So we're going to shoot for a 6 on the DBQ, which of course has a max of 7. But I think we can simplify it by not going for that last point right away. Though if you watch to the end, I will give you some advice on how to go for the 7th point if you have a few minutes left. But a key to the DBQ is always to make sure that the points you're attempting, you really do lock them down. There's no point in trying points and failing to earn them. Anyway, here we go. So as a quick reminder, the DBQ is the third of the 4 elements on the AP History exam. It takes about 60 minutes, though that is just a recommendation. You can borrow time from the LEQ if you want. It is worth 25% of your score, and you do not get a choice of prompt. What the College Board recommends is that you take 15 minutes to brainstorm and 45 minutes to write. However, I recommend using as much time as you need to brainstorm, even 20 or 25 minutes, so that you have a very clear path where you are going. There's no point in starting to write if you don't know where you're going, because you will probably pretty quickly end up off topic. So plan everything out before you get started. Again, in this video, we're shooting for what I call the Skillful 6. The 6 points that we're going to be trying to earn are the points for contextualization, a thesis claim or line of reasoning, the evidence points of using introducing and describing documents, using those documents to support an argument, and introducing evidence beyond the documents to help support our argument. We're also going to be doing some sourcing analysis with historical situation, audience, purpose, and or point of view. The point we are not shooting for from the very beginning is the complexity point, the easiest path of which is to introduce a counter argument and use all of the documents, but we'll leave that for another day and another video. Before we get writing, the pre-writing is basically the same regardless of your intended score. So let's dive into it. Just like the long essay question, we need to read and mark up the prompt. I stress this a lot in class, and I cannot stress it enough. If you miss even one word of the prompt, you are likely to end up off topic, talking about a related topic possibly, but not really answering the question. So you need to notice things like what are the time limits on the question, especially if the years in the prompt are kind of goofy and not round numbers. Figure out what are they trying to include or exclude from your analysis. Are there any geographic limits? Do we have to talk about a particular country or continent? Are there specific things we need to talk about as far as like grapiest topics? Because again, if it asks about social change and you end up talking about political change, it's off topic, and nothing you talk about in that realm will earn you credit or points. And finally, is there a historical thinking skill that makes sense based on the prompt? So that's something to think about right away too. As a quick reminder, the historical thinking skill of compare and contrast, cause and effect, or change in continuity, that is actually built into the LEQ rubric. You have to do it, and it should be obvious throughout. The DBQ doesn't list that as a rubric point. However, I think it would be not very smart to not try to organize around it anyway. It's an easy way of organizing a historian's thinking. And if you don't have that in mind, I think you're going to end up just talking about stuff rather than analyzing the prompt. So it's a good idea to do it, even though it's not overtly in the rubric. After we read and mark up the prompt, the next thing is to look for the historical thinking skill. So if you need to pause here, you can, but just think about, there's not one correct answer, but usually the AP history prompts will be set up to invite you down one of these roads in particular. Doesn't mean you can't do well by choosing a different path, but I don't think that you'll do well if you don't have one of these in mind from the very beginning. Okay, like the LEQ, when we're thinking about a thesis here, we're going to end up, whenever we decide what our thesis is, we need a claim or thesis that is decisive but not extreme. And most of my students don't fall into the trap of extreme theses, saying that absolutely everything changed, as a result of a particular development, or absolutely nothing changed. I think it strikes us as what it is, which is historically indefensible. However, sometimes my students struggle with being decisive, especially if you have a topic you're not super comfortable with. Students will often try to kind of play both sides of the question and say, well, it kind of did this, but it kind of didn't do that. The problem there is it's indecisive. It doesn't take a stand. It just sort of agrees that the prompt's question is a good question. You need to be decisive. So keep that in mind as we're working through this. Don't try to avoid being wrong. Take a stand and then defend that stand. Okay, the next few slides are examples of good and bad theses, depending on what historical thinking skill you're using. Feel free to pause the video if you want to look those over, and just make sure that whatever you end up thinking is going to fall into a correct, defensible, decisive position. Okay, decisive claims. Most prompts will kind of immediately be obvious what the two defensive, decisive claims are. That, yeah, things changed a lot, or they didn't change a lot, or, here's two things that were clearly effects of that. So often the easiest position is going to be, whenever we get to choosing a claim, to defend the prompt's implication. And on the LEQ, this is what I generally recommend: is whatever it implies might be true. 9 times out of 10, I'm just going to say, yeah, sure, that's mostly true. And that'll be my claim, regardless of whether I truly believe it. It just makes it easy. However, even though we could decide that right now in our process for the LEQ, for the DBQ, we cannot, and that is because, of course, we haven't looked at the evidence yet. The DBQ is, by definition, document-based, so we got to read the documents, but keeping in mind that we're going to want to make a claim one way or the other. So let's read and analyze the documents. All right, how do we do that? There are 3 things that I recommend doing. And the first of them is, before we even read the document, take a look at the sourcing information, which is written above the document, and just think about these happy factors and whether any of them jumps off the page. It is unlikely for each document that all 4 of them will be options, but often one of these 4 will kind of invite a conversation. Historical situation, you would look at the year of the source and just kind of ask, hey, what's going on around that time that might influence the way they're saying what they're saying. The audience is who's intended to ever have seen this. If you have an audience that has a known bias, that can make for good analysis. Likewise, if you have an audience that's like a private diary or journal or a letter to a personal friend, usually that deems the source trustworthy to historians. For purpose, just what are they trying to accomplish? You'd have to say more than is already in the sourcing information. But if we know what their motive is, why this source exists at all, that can help us analyze that. Point of view, remember, is not their opinion, but like, who are they? What's their resume? What's their social position? Who do they represent? Are there any groups they can be thought to speak for? Almost, figuratively, like, from what point are they viewing this issue? And that, as historians, of course, knowing any of these 4 things, much less all of them, helps us read the source intelligently and not just read it flatly as though it was written out of time and space. So when you're doing this in the essay later, remember, you're going to have to not only identify one of these 4 things, but explain why it matters to us as historian in terms of determining the validity of the source in our eyes. And so, yeah, you only have to do this for 2 documents to earn that point. I'd recommend trying to do 3 or more just as insurance. You don't have to do all 4 for any document. You don't have to do all 4 anywhere in the essay. You just have to do one of them once and one of them another time. It could be the same one. So yeah, anyway, as we're reading the documents, above each source, I would circle or highlight anything that strikes me as possibly analyzable and put that up above the document. Geography-wise, only put it there because that's where the sourcing information is written, is at the top of the document. So that's why I would do it there. Then I would mark up the document for later reference. Are there any keywords or phrases that might be helpful for me to use myself when I'm writing? And then finally, under each document, I'm going to summarize the content of that document. All of this work is for myself. This is just notes and raw material, but I'm trying to save myself time. I have only 60 minutes to do all of this, so I don't have time to kind of get going in my essay and then come back and reread all the documents. That's not something I have time to do. So by putting my notes and summaries on the documents, I can use them later without having to reread them, because there may be 40 or 50 minutes between my reading for the first time and my usage of the document. So I want to save myself time. As a quick reminder, in terms of using the documents, you must support the argument using at least 4 documents, and I would vastly prefer 5, which gives me insurance in case I mess one up. You could earn a complexity point by using all 7 documents, but since we are not from the beginning setting out to write a complexity paragraph, I don't think that that is a good option on the Skillful 6 version of this essay. Also, if you run into documents, and you won't know this no matter what your goal from the beginning is, but if you run into a document or even 2 that you just straight up don't understand, just skip them. Don't waste time and effort trying to use documents that you don't know really what they mean. Throw them aside as though they don't exist. I don't have to have them. Another number to know is that we must analyze that happy sourcing information for at least 2 documents. And again, I recommend trying at least 3, because if I mess one up, then I still have my insurance and I still hit the required threshold. Okay, I could earn the complexity point by sourcing 4 or more of these, and we'll talk more about that later, because that might be an option that's in play for us. Again, as a quick reminder here, when you're writing an LEQ, you get to choose all of the evidence. And so as we're setting up an essay and an LEQ, you don't have to use any evidence that goes against your claim. You can just kind of argue one-sidedly. Now, we may want to try to include some counter evidence and get that complexity point, but we don't have to. For the DBQ, it's worth noting that the documents will be chosen to point various ways. The people who make up the question and choose the documents, these readers and AP teachers, they're not going to give you 7 documents that all agree with the same outcome for the same reasons. And you need to know that going in. If you read the documents and you think, oh, this is awesome, they all agree with each other, then you are making a mistake. You have messed up in one of or more of your readings. They will say or be mainly usable in different directions, and even the ones that agree to some extent are going to have nuanced differences. Maybe they say the same thing or similar things, but for wildly different reasons. So just know going in, the documents are designed to give you a complex body of evidence, and to see, as a historian, what can you do with that? So that's really important, that you, as a historian, they want to know, can you take seemingly conflicting evidence and make sense of it? Okay. For now, though, since we're not in this version of the essay shooting for 7 out of 7, we're just going to ignore documents that are unusable to support our claim. So just set those to the side, as long as we have at least 4, preferably 5, that we can kind of use to argue one way, then we are set to go. The next thing we want to do is group the documents. When I do this in class, often I give you papers and make you cut them up and actually physically move them into documents. On test day, that won't be possible, but the idea is to get the documents to kind of talk together. It's not enough that we just sort of recite document 1 says this, and document 2 says that, and document 3 says this thing. We need to get them kind of saying similar things where we can analyze them. And here is where we're designing our body paragraphs. Okay, so as far as the grouping, the first time, just kind of read through and just lump them together into documents that kind of point one way on the question and documents that kind of point the other way on the question. There's, and some documents you'll be able to use both ways. The AP writers often will include documents that there are elements that point each direction within the same document. And that's, of course, like, again, this is what historians do. That's not uncommon or abnormal. Remember, these documents were not written for our prompt. They're written in real time by real people addressing real issues. So it's normal that we would be able to use them in multitude of ways. So anyway, just kind of lump them into the majority and minority. And what you're doing there is determining your claim. That becomes your claim, whichever direction the pile mostly points. As you're doing this, if you need a group of like one document, that's totally fine. But no purposeless groups. Often when a student tries to say this and this group is my other documents, what they really mean is they don't understand that document, or maybe more than one. But if there's no purpose to the group, get rid of it. Like, you just need 4 or more documents that you understand, then we can mess with those. Okay. Once we've got our documents and we choose the majority, like, that's now our claim, and we're going to mess with those. At the minority, we can use, like, especially if we're shooting for a 7 from the very beginning, we're going to use those to create a counter argument, and we'll go explore that. But for now, like, we're just going to, as long as we got 4 or 5 or more in the majority pile, we are set. So ignore the documents that don't help you, and we're going to now subdivide that main group to lay out a multifaceted line of reasoning, documents that sort of agree, but maybe they analyze different subtopics, or they agree for different reasons, or they agree for different places around the globe. You can kind of subdivide that. So now we're going to, like, create more groupings, and we want at least 2 elements to this line of reasoning. So support a claim for this reason, support a claim for that reason. We can have more than 2 if you want a third group, like, no problem at all. You can absolutely do that. There's nothing in the rubric about number of paragraphs or number of elements in the line of reasoning. You just need multiple avenues to explore the topic. So however you want to divide up that pile, that's fine. Again, just making sure we got to use at least 4 total documents. And I really would strongly prefer 5 or more, because that is insurance in case we misinterpret one. But 4 is the number. Got to hit it. Great. So when we've done all this, if we've grouped the documents and then kind of subgrouped the documents, whatever the main group is, the majority group, that became our thesis, our position on the prompt, and whatever our subgroups are, that's our line of reasoning. 2 last things to do prior to starting on the writing. We're going to have to brainstorm a bit for contextualization and evidence beyond the documents. Really, what the AP readers are trying to do here is they're trying to determine whether you actually know anything about this subject, or is everything you know about the subject basically what they gave you in the documents. So do you know your history? Okay, so contextualization is sort of fitting in the topic, fitting this prompt into a bigger historical situation. So what we want to do is we're going to need to set that historical situation for the essay topic. What's going on concerning this place, this topic, whatever the subject of the prompt is, what's going on leading up to it? What's the background of the situation? What historical developments have happened in the near future, or the near past, to whatever the subject of this prompt is? Okay, so it needs to be close in time. If it's some sort of development in Renaissance Christianity, don't start talking about the life of Jesus. Like, that doesn't work. It's got to be kind of immediate. So I guess if we're talking about, like, the Reformation, then the historical situation would be like, let's talk about the medieval Catholic Church and, how its impact on society. This doesn't need to be very long, like 3 or 4 sentences is fine. This is the exact same process as the long essay question, but it needs to be detailed. If you're just sort of vague and talking about change and other just vague words, like, you're not going to fool the AP readers. So give us that background, show off that you know why this question is a good question, what leads up to the subject of the prompt. Likewise, they want to know within the prompt itself, what else do you know? So this you'll sometimes see summarized in the AP literature as EBD, or evidence beyond the documents. What is one thing that you know about this topic that is not mentioned in the documents that can work alongside the documents to support your claim. Again, you don't need a ton of things. You need one thing that you can explain in some detail. A sentence or two is fine, but it's got to be detailed. It can't just be what the rubric often calls a mere phrase or reference. And so both of these, hopefully you can see that both of these are attempts by the College Board, attempts by the AP readers to know whether you actually know anything about the subject on your own or whether you're just sort of working with the information that they've given you. Each of these is worth a point. If you get brain freeze, if you're stuck, if you can't even think about what to think about, go back to this hideous clip art grapes and go through your grapiest categories. Is there anything I know about this topic geographically? Is there anything I know about this topic religiously, and so on? Okay, and you don't have to do them all. Just get a couple good ideas, and off we go. All right, all that done, then we're ready to write. And again, if it's been 15 or 20 or even 25 minutes, like now we know where we're going. We have a full set of directions to the end of the essay. Our opening paragraph is going to be trying to earn 2 points, the contextualization point and the thesis claim line of reasoning point. So we start with those broader events before the period, talked about this already, but we earn the contextualization point by showing this topic's historical situation, what preceded or led up to this topic, show off your knowledge, leave no doubt that you are a well-informed historian, and I recommend 3-ish sentences, not because that number's in the rubric, but I find that students who write that amount usually have done enough, assuming there's detail in them, to earn the point. Students who write only one sentence, often it is a mere phrase or reference, and even though they try, they do not earn the point. So that's my recommendation. Once you're done with your context, you're starting with that broad context and, like the inverted pyramid, narrowing down to your claim and line of reasoning. Okay, so take a stand, a claim, like just repeat the language of the prompt, repeat most of the language of the prompt, and then make sure that you're hitting all those specifics, the time and topic limits. Be decisive and use a historical thinking skill. Make a clear stand on the question, and then add the line of reasoning, these 2 or maybe more kind of because statements that show here's the paths I intend to analyze in order to prove this claim. These will become the cornerstones of your subsequent body paragraphs. And remember, without a line of reasoning, you are unable at all to earn the claim point. They go together, and you can only get the point if you do both. So this is your basic format to kind of memorize. Restate all those key aspects of the prompt, often kind of word for word. Take a stand, take a position, and then conclude your sentence with, as seen in this, and whatever that first group of your documents is, and as seen in that, or those become your reasons. So it's like restate the key aspects of the prompt. Here's my argument because of this and because of that. Or if you've got 3, add another. And now our essay is outlined and we're ready to go. We've already got 2 of our 6 points in the bag, and now we're going to the body paragraphs to try to earn 4 more. There's a lot to do in the body paragraphs, but if you have a bit of a checklist, it isn't that hard if you've laid out a good roadmap for where we're going. So there's really 4 points that we're going to try to earn in the body paragraphs. Okay, one of them, well, there's 3 that have to do with evidence. The easiest point of the whole essay is the first evidence point. Basically, all we got to do for this point, and I don't even dwell on it in the class because it's such a low bar, but we got to explain the content of 3 different documents. Literally, if you did nothing but summarize 3 documents and that was your entire essay, you would get a point for that. However, we are aiming a lot more for that. So for a document, we need to not just explain its content in our own words. I also recommend that you cite each document after you use it. That will make sure that your AP reader, even if in a hurry, doesn't miss it. And we're going to do this for at least 4 of the documents because that goes together with the analysis point. As a quick tip, you are allowed to quote the documents, but if you just quote it and don't explain it or describe it in your own words, you will not get credit for that point or for that usage. Quoting is proof that you can copy, which any small child can do. The question is, do you understand it? That's got to be your own words. So in a way, like Quoting is sort of, putting it on a tee so that you can hit it. But you got to still do the hitting yourself. Quoting is not proof of understanding. So explain it in your own words. So in addition to explaining the content of a particular document, we also then need to use that document to support an argument. And so we're kind of describe the content of a document and then use it, and describe another one and use it. Without that usage, we can't earn our second evidentiary point of in doing this process with at least 4 of the documents. Okay. A tip on this is to use phrases like "for example," or "this shows," or "this proves," or "this demonstrates." These phrases mean you're about to, there's only one way to finish a sentence like that, and that is to use your evidence. So I love, when I'm reading student essays, I love seeing that phrase, because I know the student's intentionally doing the second part of it. They're not just describing the content of a document, but they are using that to make an argument. So anyway, if you kind of use those phrases a lot, you'll probably be on the right track, assuming you finish the sentences. The third evidence point is, remember back to our evidence beyond the documents. We got to do that at least once. I'd recommend doing it again. I like insurance, so do it at least twice. But providing one specific example of evidence not mentioned in the documents, show some detailed knowledge, and again, use it to support your argument. So it's just treat it like a document, except it's not from the documents, it's from your own head. But kind of introduce it, explain it, describe it, and then use it to support an argument. Okay. Finally, the fourth point that we're looking for in these body paragraphs has to do with the analysis and reasoning category. So for a couple of documents along the way, you want to identify one of those HAP or P, historical situation, audience, purpose, or point of view factors. And then again, not just identify it. Hey, he's writing to an audience of blank, or this document is written for the purpose of blank, but then explain why it is relevant to you as a historian. So we can trust it a little more. They might have this sort of bias. They might be saying things the group wants to hear. Just something that sort of recognizes that you can read between the lines and understand this. So if we do this a couple of times in our body paragraphs, we will get that point. Cool. So again, you can pause along the way if you're trying to write this at home, but let's go kind of through this. First body paragraph, of course, we're going to start with our first line of reasoning, which is based on our first group of documents. So kind of reintroduce the topic, reintroduce what the theme of that grouping is, and then start using the documents. So describe the content of a document. Hey, document 1 says blah, blah, blah. And then don't just describe it, but we want to then use that document to support an argument. These do not need to be super robust. I mean, these could be a sentence each, or possibly even merged into a single sentence. You don't want to spend 3, 4, 5 sentences describing the content of the document. If you read student examples of ones that have scored well, you'll notice it's not super robust, but it is there. You have to show that you understand what the document is about, and then use it to support your argument. And possibly with this document, certainly with some of them along the way, then just kind of throw in that sourcing analysis. Mention, yeah, but this document was written from the point of view of the king, or a rebel, or a peasant girl, and so when we read it, they may have this sort of bias. Why is it why is knowing that insightful to you as a historian as you read? Again, just kind of follow this pattern for as many documents there is in this group. So describe the content of a document, use it to make an argument, possibly do the sourcing. Back and forth we go with as many documents are in this group. Somewhere along the way in this body paragraph, we might want to take the time to do our evidence beyond the documents. Again, we need to not just show off some knowledge here, but also we need to use it to support our argument as well. Cool. Body paragraph 2 then becomes the exact same thing. And so we're going to do this over and over. As a quick reminder on how, minimum standards, we got to use at least 4 documents to make our argument. I recommend 5 or more. You must source at least 2 documents at some point. I recommend 3 or more. Also, we need to introduce at least 1 piece of evidence beyond the documents. I recommend 2 or more. And that way you have your insurance, you've got the points that you need. So for those of you who are kind of visual about this, like here's our sort of structure. So the opening paragraph starts broad with contextualization. It narrows down to a thesis, claim, and line of reasoning. Body paragraph on average, use 2 or more documents, not just describing the content, but interpreting it. Use that happy analysis at least once, and then use that evidence beyond the documents at least once. This is body paragraph number 2, same deal. And if we've done that, then you can be done. Like if you've done that and done well, you can have a 6 out of the 7 points available. It doesn't have to be super complicated, and a job well done here. Okay. Now, here's where you have earned those points if you've done it. So you get a point for contextualization, you get a point for your thesis, claim, and line of reasoning. Describing the content of 3 documents earned you a point, but describing 4 instead of 3 documents and using each to support an argument in response to the prompt also earns another point. If you mention that HAP sourcing and explain why it matters 2 or more times, that earned you a point. And if you introduced a piece of evidence beyond the document, showed some knowledge of it, used it to support your argument, you are at a 6 and sitting pretty. 6 is easily going to be above average for the DBQ when the results come in. Okay, so if that's all you do, like you're in great shape. A quick tip for you, and this is an important one. Don't worry about the 7th point until you're sure you've earned all of these. So as you wind down, like let's assume we have a little extra time, like make sure that each of these is earned. I see so many students try to go for all 7 points and end up getting, a 2 or 3 because there's a lot of categories in which they try, but they don't quite succeed, or they don't hit the number, or they don't really understand what they're doing. But if we have more time, now what? Like, let's say that we have, 5 minutes left or even 10 minutes left in our time. Do we have more time? Well, first of all, ask yourself, are you confident in each of the points that you've not just tried to earn them, but you actually have earned them? You've locked down those points. Each point is absolutely all or nothing. So carefully, I guess the first thing I would do, carefully re-examine the prompt, go back and read it word for word and make sure you did exactly what it asked you to do and you stayed within the parameters set for it, your essay. Then carefully reread your whole essay with the rubric in mind. Did I nail these things? We can refer to Master Yoda. For each of these points, we do or do not, there is no try. There's no such thing as effort points. So make sure that you've hit those things. Now, let's say we have more time. Do you have more time? Are you confident that each of the points you've tried to earn? If not, like go back and fix it. Go back and make sure, like really solidify those points and make sure that you've got those. One option, I get students asking, should I write a conclusion paragraph? And the answer is you don't have to. There's nothing in the rubric about having a conclusion. But one thing that does often happen is that it can be good insurance for a couple of the early points. So we could write a conclusion paragraph. Okay, so here is kind of how that would look. If you're going to do it, kind of reread the prompt and you realize, ooh, what I answered, what I argued over the course of this thing, maybe I got a little bit off track. What we want to do at the end is like invert the pyramid and write a conclusion. I would not reread my opening paragraph. And here's why. So on this, we're not trying for any points we haven't already tried for. But it often happens that when you start writing and it's 15 minutes into seeing this essay, you aren't in your head 100% clear of where you're going. And so you end up over the course of the hour sort of clarifying your thinking. And after 55 minutes, you are much clearer on like where you ended up and what you proved than you were at 15 minutes. So I would not, if you're going to do this, reread your opening contextualization and opening, thesis, claim, line of reasoning. Don't even read it, because if all you're going to do is kind of recopy it, like you're wasting your time, completely wasting your time. What you want to do is, like, if you thought they were probably pretty weak when I wrote that a half an hour ago, now is a chance to fix it. So what you would do is kind of think about what you've proven and then just invert that pyramid. So because of this, and because of that, here's my claim. I would reread the prompt and use its language, but not reread my previous claim, and don't use that language again because there's no point. And then contextualization, it's a point that must be earned, like the thesis claim line of reasoning. It must be earned according to the rubric, quote, in the introduction or conclusion. And so it is, I've read thousands of these essays over the years. It is not uncommon that a student tries to earn one or both of these points at the beginning of the essay. They fail to do it because their thinking's not super clear or they're off task. And then at the end, they throw in a short conclusion with a thesis claim line of reasoning or some what happened next. So the contextualization here would be what happened immediately after the scope of this question concerning this topic. I have many times, dozens at least, maybe hundreds, seen students earn these points in the last paragraph, having failed to do so in the first paragraph. So this is an option for you. If you think your beginning was kind of weak, that's understandable. You're under a time constraint. Maybe your thinking's become more clear throughout the writing process, and great, you can do this. If, on the other hand, you have more time and you kind of reread your stuff, you say, I think I'm pretty good. I think I got all these. Let's say that I am done and I'm confident that my Skillful 6 is actually a 6. What can we do? Well, let's see about the 7th point. There are many, many different paths to the 7th point. However, I think there's one that is easiest to add at the last minute. Some of them, a lot of them, for instance, using all of the documents, it kind of requires planning from the very beginning. However, with this is one path to the 7th point, and it doesn't require really advanced planning. It's a very opportunistic path, and that is doing that happy sourcing for 4 or more documents. So, I already recommended you try it 3 times just for insurance. What if you try it for, 5 times? And this is one where you can kind of go back through the essay and just find each document, find your notes from the beginning of the time, and are there any others you can do the happy sourcing for? I've seen several authors that simply try it on all 7 of them. Like if you've got 10 minutes left with this time, try it once for each document. You're almost guaranteed to successfully do it 4 times if you try it 7 times. So anyway, if you have time, this is my recommendation on how to maybe grab that last point at the last minute, having not particularly planned for it. Okay, so if you did that, here's kind of how your scoreboard was set up. And instead of twice or more, we've now done it 4 times. And that is where that second point can come in. And we earn our full credit, 7 out of 7. Okay, if you are turning this in, if you're using this video to help walk through and turn something into me, typing it in a Google Doc, use the highlighting palette colors in Google Docs to highlight each element before you turn it in, so I can see where you tried to do various things, and you can see it for yourself as well. So no accidents, maybe it's in there somewhere. Anyway, you can use this. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and I wish you very good luck learning to write good DBQs and doing well on your AP exam.